One more minute.
Hello and welcome back to the Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host Ryan. I'm joined today by my lovely cohort of co-hosts, Wyatt.
Hello.
And both Alexes, one of which, the first words it recorded in this episode were yours. Said one more minute.
Oh my god.
Amazing. And a good intro.
We always catch you on the best days, clearly.
Oh yeah. Look, Alex's quips always give us the engagement that we need. We've got a lot to talk about today.
I don't know if I have another Willem Dafoe or COD rant in me.
Not right now. We gotta save that for the Baldur's Gate.
We gotta space those out every season or every year, I guess. We gotta space those out.
Yep. All right. So we got a lot to talk about today. We got a ton of stuff going down. We're gonna get into the Unity kerfuffle very soon because we all have a lot of experience with Unity as an engine, good and bad. And I think we'll have a lot to say about all of the stuff that Unity's doing. But aside from that, we also had surprise Nintendo Direct and surprise State of Play, which we're gonna go through pretty quickly because I think these were ones that appealed to a lot of specific people and less so everyone in this group. So I'm gonna run through the stuff that I really liked. We'll hop to anything that other people noticed or something they want to talk about. We'll have footage up of those running as we're talking about them, and then we'll go through first impressions on the games that we've been playing lately, which I think for all of us is basically Baldur's Gate, Starfield, and maybe Armored Core. So yeah, we're gonna get into a lot of those games. And we'll talk more about them because we're planning full episodes on both Armored Core and Starfield in the next couple of weeks. So we got a lot of fun stuff to get to. Let's go ahead and kick ourselves off with something fun, which is the Nintendo Direct that happened. And this is the one that happened on September 14th, just a couple of days ago for us. It'll be a few days behind on the recording. But yeah, we saw new Splatoon stuff. Very, I think, what everyone is expecting. I think the biggest surprise here is Mario vs. Donkey Kong being a thing coming out. So we're getting an actual Donkey Kong follow-up game, which is very cool. I don't know that any of us have the attachment to this that precludes a bigger discussion, but It looks neat. I don't think I'll buy it. It looks neat. I think is my
I do feel like cool. I think I heard that game was good. I definitely think I heard that its sequel was better, and I don't know why that doesn't just get the remake treatment instead, kind of.
Yeah, I think Nintendo is a fan of doing remakes of games that weren't as good now. That honestly has seemed, which I think has merit to it. Like we've talked before about how most of the games getting remakes are games that weren't amazing to begin with, and we're now starting to see more games that are actually good getting remakes. So, or actually weren't good to start with that are getting good remakes. Yeah, looks cool. I was happy to see Prince of Persia: Lost Crown again. This game looks really fun. It's got a great art style still. We see a lot more environment stuff here. I think this is a very fun-looking adaptation of Prince of Persia into something that it originally was, but wasn't for a long time, which is a side-scroller.
Not to make it sound like I don't know what we're talking about, but that's a totally new game, right?
So there is a Prince of Persia remake in production, so it's understandable to be confused about this because there is a remake of Sands of Time, I believe, that has been
it's in
like
development
Metroid Prime 4. It has been going between different states of being for a little while.
I feel like
that's a good way to put it.
I don't want to roast anybody, but I do feel like that's the majority of games that I hear about in production at Ubisoft in the past couple of years.
Yeah, supposedly. So what happened with Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake is that they had planned that to be a lower budget, less big deal. Like it was going to be the level of remake of something like a Metroid Prime remastered and not a full remake. But the reaction to it was so astoundingly like positive about the game being remade, but kind of negative on the art style that they'd chosen and a bunch of other stuff that it went back in the oven for a bit, which I think is a sensible decision. especially because they have Lost Crown coming out, so they've got a Prince of Persia thing that will hopefully get some interest back in the series.
It's the least bewildering game in development hell that Ubisoft has.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. Next was Horizon Chase 2. I don't know if any of you have played Horizon Chase 1. It's a very fun game. It's basically what if you took something like Outrun and made it today with modern technology and stuff. So
Now,
it's just a really solid racing game.
I'm assuming that this has nothing to do with Forza Horizon. I wonder
Absolutely not.
I wonder if people might be a little confused.
Also, nothing to do with the Horizon game series.
Because it's obviously not a Forza game, but it is called Horizon. And so I wonder if some people watch this and were like, wait, what?
I really hope we get someone going, why isn't Aloy in this game? That's my real hope with this one. Rhythm Castle.
I don't remember cars in the last two.
Mention Rhythm Castle really quickly because this game looks really fun and I've heard really good previews. It's a party rhythm game. Moving on. We have some Spy Family stuff. None of us, I think, are following that show or manga at all, so nothing to say about it.
Is it a game?
It is a game, but it's I don't know what the game is. It looks to center around the little girl. That's about what I've gathered.
I've watched a little of it. I haven't finished the first season.
I know people love it. I've never seen it, so I can't comment on it. Super Mario RPG Remake is another big one coming out, I believe, next month.
Yeah.
Looks very good.
I feel like that was like the biggest takeaway from this for a lot of people, because I feel like Super Mario RPG and Thousand Year Door are things that people have been asking for a very, very long time.
And they're both looking really good from what we've seen. Like, this is a gorgeous art style that they chose for Super Mario RPG. I think this game looks absolutely great.
I think it's a perfect
speaking of
modernization of the same.
Yeah, this is absolutely the like Mario thing from this that I'm most interested in. Another Code is a weird franchise coming from some old stuff. I don't think any of us ever played the old stuff. It's based on an old game, from what I've heard. That
it looks really pretty,
none of us
kind
have
of
played.
like it's a more roamy feeling point and click. It looks like
absolutely. So this reminds me. The reason I paused on this to talk about it is because this absolutely, to me, looks like the Somnium Files in terms of gameplay, which is one of my favorite games of the year that it came out. So I'm actually very interested to play this at some point because I think it is these type of like actual third-person adventure games where the gameplay really is just like regular point-and-click style stuff, but you're roaming around and you get a cooler look at the environment and all that. I think this looks really cool. I'm intrigued more than anything else, just because I know nothing about what this is based on. So yeah, I'm excited to get a chance to look at it when it actually comes out. Princess Peach game got shown off, so it's called Princess Peach Showtime, and it's a Princess Peach like platforming adventure, it looks like. I think the moment that sold everyone on this is the whole reveal of costume changing. Because the Musketeer outfit is really good. Sword Fighter Peach. I don't know, I think this looks fun. I was not interested in this game before, but I think they've pulled together with this trailer to show something really interesting. Because last time we just kind of got an announcement that it was a game about Peach, but nothing else, and now we see what it looks like. Looks cool.
Which feels kind of strange to me. I don't know if this game needed that kind of buildup of like, oh, a Peach game is coming, just you guys wait.
Followed it up with the actual trailers for not Paper Mario, but Super Mario RPG and Mario Wonder, like right afterwards. So it feels like you kind of deflate the Peach announcement by this other stuff. And this looks really fun. I think this is a very interesting looking game. It seems like it's taken a bit of a different tack than the other Mario games that are coming out, which is exciting that we can get for like Mario universe games in a very close period that all seem very different.
Yeah, it's one of those like franchises where you can just do a lot of wacky weird things with it, and we've seen that over the years, and it's cool to see that they're still kind of experimenting with like, what can we do with the Mario IP that's just
especially
like,
because the premise for this Peach game is that you're trying to like put on a play and having to save a bunch of the performers and like make sure the play goes well, which I think is just a very fun premise for a game.
Yeah.
Let's move into Saga Emerald Beyond, because all the Saga remakes that we're getting finally have led to something, which is Emerald Beyond. It seems like an actual new Saga game, unless this was a thing that came out in Japan that I didn't know about, but it seems like we're getting a proper new Saga game that is obviously like lower budget.
Is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah, that's what we're seeing here.
This looks way different than the Saga games I know.
Well, the Saga games that most people know are like mostly 2D.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like it's taking a lot of stuff from, I want to say Scarlet Fate or something. It's Saga Scarlet Grace, that's what it is. Where it has like the overworld map and then a smaller selection of characters, but looks a lot more in-depth in combat and whatnot. And yeah, I'm super excited for this just because Saga games are a really unique series of RPGs that tend to follow a very different design philosophy than other games. And they're very fun. They're really based on like player choice and all that. Yeah, this looks a lot like, it reminds me a lot of Scarlet Grace, which I think is a very good game that was like PSP, so it's obviously not super detailed, but yeah. Moving on, Tomb Raider is back. Detective Pikachu is back.
3. Yeah.
Trombone Champ is back.
Wait, is back? I thought that was a meme. I didn't think that was an actual game.
Oh no, that's a real game.
Trombone Champ is a real game. Yeah, this is a real game. It's got exceedingly good reviews. Yeah, it's been out on PC for a long time. But it's coming to Switch. And what's great is you can play it with motion controls.
Oh boy.
That's a thing you can do.
This.
That's a thing you can do.
Oh my god,
like
those wacky motion controls. I guarantee you the devs had like a blast making just the worst motion controls for this game.
Only people using the IR sensor on the Switch. Yeah.
I don't think I realized that there even was one that could be used like that.
All right, the weird Contra game is back. Jumping in, this is, I think, my single most hyped thing from this announcement. It's called Unicorn Overlord, which is a bad name.
Title. What? I love the title for that.
I love the title. It's very goofy, but it's also, I think, going to get dragged over the coals and probably set people's impressions of this game somewhere weird. I just think this looks, whatever I'm looking at, I'm super into. That's the gist of my appreciation for this game. But this is made by Vanillaware. I don't know if Vanillaware rings bells for people, but great studio.
I want to say this right now. I watched this entire direct, right, of Sound Mind. I do not remember seeing footage of this at all. I do not remember this section of the presentation.
Maybe you took a bathroom break.
This looks. I don't know what this is.
What else did you say Vanillaware did?
So they did Dragon's Crown, they did Odin Sphere, they did 13 Sentinels, which was my game of the year for the game it came out for the year it came out.
Looking at this game and I went, huh, looks like that.
Absolutely, the Vanillaware art style is immediately recognizable. Looks incredible. I am super into the art style of this. I'm also big into grand strategy games, and taking grand strategy into a new sort of thing looks very fun. Yeah, I feel like Atlas and Vanillaware is a combo that probably can't do a lot of wrong. We're getting Luigi's Mansion 2, which I believe is Dark Moon. I want to say it's the 3DS one, just getting ported to Switch, but with a 2 instead of Dark Moon being the name, which makes sense. People know it's Luigi's Mansion 2 in the realm of Luigi's Mansion, and then 3 being the next one that came out. Some cool Nintendo Museum actually in real life announcement that is opening up at some point. I think they said they want this to open in 2024. So not super far off. A bunch of amiibo stuff. F-Zero 99. Very cool. Very into the 99 series of games, and I think F-Zero is a great pick to give this.
I hope this one doesn't go away like some of the others.
I feel like this might be testing the waters for F-Zero. I'm hoping this is them testing interest for F-Zero.
For sure.
Yeah. F-Zero 99 exists.
These kind of games, I don't play them that often, but they're really cute and like typically like well designed for what they are. And so it's a fun little, and I feel like they're relatively easy to develop too. So it's this fun thing that you can do, like that you can develop on the side along with everything else that you're making. It's just all around a good thing, I'd say.
Yep, they're doing a fancy controller. There's another League of Legends story game that, of course, is a farming game, so I have to be
What?
interested in that.
What?
I don't know if it's really a
I
farming game, but
am
it's like having a
actually
little...
more interested in this than some of the others.
It's like
I think it looks very cute. So
it's like at this point, farming games is like when you're marketing it and when you're developing it, it's a flowchart now. It's like, are you making a farming simulator? Yes, then then it has to be shown off at a Nintendo Direct.
absolutely.
That's its like ultimate fate at this point.
Yeah, I really like the art style for this. I think it reminds me a lot of Moonlighter, which was a
Mhm.
really, really cool game. Great art style. So
Which we
excited
talked
to
about
get the
in a
chance.
previous.
Is this developed in-house by Riot or?
I don't know who develops this. I doubt it. Usually their League of Legends story games are external developers.
I'll look it up later.
Yeah, I guess it's Riot Forge.
Riot
Lazy Bear
Forge.
Games. There it is. That's the name.
Yeah, with a
Doesn't
lot of the
sound-
Riot
The
Forge
new games
projects,
coming.
Riot aren't like developing them. They're like kind of allowing other studios to make games that are in that.
They're doing
Universe,
the
which I
Warhammer
always
thing of
thought-
giving their IP to everyone.
Which I
Which is
think is
great.
an interesting, like, as someone who isn't into like, I'm not into League of Legends at all except for anything arcane related, but now that I'm kind of into that world more, I like this idea of like, hey, let's give other developers like a chance to tell different stories or try different things in our own world.
Yeah, and I mean they have like 210 freaking characters and
Yeah.
Yeah, like a ton.
They got a lot of
League
material
Legends,
to work
so
with.
exactly there's so many characters that are probably not a ton more than just a concept, but an interesting enough concept to expound upon in another game or show or whatever.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're also getting a WarioWare game. This should have been a pack-in game when the Switch launched because it looks fun. It looks like a better version of 1-2 Switch. So I wish this existed when the Switch came out and was the pack-in game for it because I think it would have sold really well. But here we are in 2023. This is Aiden Chronicles. This is another very successful Kickstarter to revive, not really revive, because the franchise it's based on is not the same franchise. It's having to be a spiritual successor. But inspired by an old series of games I'm missing the name of, where the whole gimmick is you collect a ton of different heroes and they are forming your party and whatnot. There's lots to do. I think this one looks very good. It's been shaping up very well, so I'm excited to see what it's actually like when it comes out. It's got beautiful looking combat, so
I like the art style too. I think this is like a much better approach to that Octopath Traveler.
Yeah, because
art
it
style, in my
isn't
opinion.
covered in bloom.
Yeah, well, it
It's
doesn't
not
cover
covered
it in
It's
bloom,
not washed out.
and it doesn't have the most disgusting color palette I've ever seen.
Brown
we have-
Town.
we
I think
have
Octopath 2 is a lot
brown,
better about that.
We
but-
have corn yellow.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Wargroove got a sequel. And it's coming out soon-ish, I
Yeah.
think, or maybe next year.
But
Very cool
First
game.
Wargroove was great. I think I'm not going to say that this is a tough sell, but I feel like part of the reason Wargroove was a success and people talked about it is because we don't have Advance Wars, or we didn't at the time. And now that we have 1 and 2 reboot camp, I wonder how successful it's going to be in a world where we have modern
Yeah.
Advance Wars. But
I think it'll
I mean,
still
the first
be
one was
pretty
great.
successful. Because I
Advanced
think the first
Modern
one was really
Warfare.
well received. And this looks like it has a couple of modes that seem very interesting. Like they showed a conquest mode at some point. That
And
looks
they always-
like
and
the
they did-
classic Star Wars Battlefront conquest mode type thing, which I really liked.
Yeah.
So
And they did do their own thing, so it's not like it's just Advance Wars. I think it'll do well. It's just I do feel like that was part of the reason the first game stuck out so
Yeah.
much.
Dave the Diver coming to Switch, great game. Excited to see it on Switch. Mario Kart Battle, or not Battle Pass, the Booster Course Pass is coming out. Of course, Among Us is coming to Switch, and then the big one is the Thousand Year Door remake. This is a great game. I don't know if any of you have gotten the chance to play it before, but it's an extremely good Mario game, and one of the best Mario like RPG style things. So, super excited for this to come out.
I kind of feel like I haven't played a ton of Paper Mario, but I don't feel like any of the ones that followed this quite lived up to it.
Yeah, I think it's generally
Not to say that any of them were bad necessarily. I actually kind of like some of them, but this one was definitely like peak.
Yeah. All right, let's hop to the state of play because we got a lot to talk about, and we're gonna blaze through some
Do
of
we?
this stuff. Well, we have a lot of other stuff to talk about outside of the state of play. The state of play, I don't actually think we have a lot to talk about, but
I think yeah. I think overall I was slightly more interested in this just because I think PlayStation is more my home turf than Nintendo stuff typically is. But it still falls in that same category of like, not a whole lot that really stuck out to me that much. That
yeah,
first
it was
game they
announced the
showed
day
off
before, and it's a lot of updates on games that we know about. So
that first game they showed off was annoying, and I wanted it to stop.
yeah, so this is baby steps, which I believe Bennett Foddy has some responsibility for this
Oh,
somewhere.
no.
Oh, is this? Oh, yeah.
So
This
it's a
okay.
very, it's like a
Relaxing
frustration
steps?
game.
Okay, there's been a trend of protagonists in games not shutting up and having the worst dialogue of all time. I feel like it's crescendoed to this point. This stupid asshole wouldn't shut up for the entire trailer, and I wanted this whole thing is like a couple minutes long, and I wanted it to be over.
Yeah, I think this trailer was too long for sure. It
Yep.
was like 2 minutes, and it should have been half the amount of time. I think this game looks fine. It's just not my thing. I'm sure it will be plenty of streamers' things because this absolutely seems like it'll do great for streamers.
It's streamer rage bait, and there's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with
I don't
that.
want
It's
to call
just
it
it doesn't.
streamer bait, but
But
it's high quality streamer bait.
oh,
They're
I don't
actually-
think it looks bad.
to be
I
clear,
think it
when I
looks
say
like
that,
goofball fun, but
I don't mean that as a bad thing at all. Like those games definitely have a place, and there's people that are really into those games, and that's totally fine. It's just I don't know if that kind of game required a trailer that was this long. I will say the one funny bit in the entire thing was like the grappling hook bit. I thought was actually kind of funny.
Yeah, that's I have turned subtitles on exactly so people can see it.
I thought that was funny.
Uh,
That was a genuinely funny bit, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this looks kind of neat, but I don't know that I'll ever play this. We'll see. I think the gif of the snowboarding or the skateboarding part absolutely is very fun. But yeah, the rage games are not a big deal to me. See a lot of Roblox coming to PlayStation, which is a weird one. I feel like that's a
That
weird
scares me.
call.
it scares me.
Resident Evil stuff. So the big Resident Evil thing is that we're getting the actual Separate Ways DLC, which is the story from the original that stars Ada. In this version, I think we got to get ready for a whole new wave of people complaining about the change of voice actress for Ada. It's gonna be great.
Oh, boy.
Like it's feedback that I agree with, but that ship has sailed and it's unnecessary. And it's bad to say bad things to the actress because she did a job.
Weird. This is a totally weird question. There was supposed to be a multiplayer like game / mode that came out in like at the same time as 8, and it got delayed. And is it just still indefinitely delayed?
What is that?
Sorry,
what
I
is
don't mean to
that
be taken away
called?
from the state of
So-
play. I just
I
remember
just-
that was supposed to
always
exist.
a multiplayer thing with every RE. I think I want to say Mercenaries is RE4's thing and not RE8's. I think 8 has
It
some
was
other
like
funky thing.
It
but
was supposed to be like it's a standalone
I
thing.
think it might have been Reverse, which was not
Yeah.
well received. I believe it is out, but just
It
I
had
don't
a
know.
beta.
Multiplayer Resident Evil shooter seems like a weird, especially competitive shooter, does not seem like a game that I think most people are wanting.
No,
I could see
probably
there being a lot more appeal in like a horde shooter thing, which is more what Mercenaries is and a lot of the other stuff that the RE games do, but not that. We see a bunch more Avatar gameplay. I think this actually is a much better showing than what Avatar had at the Ubisoft thing a while back, because we actually see first-person gameplay.
Yeah. This I
actually-
feel very similarly though, where it's like this looks like this looks like typical Ubisoft open world stuff, but in Avatar. And like I said last time, I'm kind of okay with that. I don't know. It still looks kind of fun.
Yeah, I think this is selling the art a little bit more than the Ubisoft one because we're actually seeing what is clearly gameplay happening. So,
yeah,
I am not a big fan of Avatar. I haven't seen the newer movie. I probably should, but I also missed it in the theater, and that's probably the best way to see it.
I watched it recently, and it's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, I thought that the original was like a total 6 out of 10, if that. But I do actually think that setting for a video game almost makes more sense than the movies.
Absolutely.
So, I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, I think this could be fun. I'm still not super sold on this entire concept, but I think this does a much better job of showing why they chose first person because it does look very impressive in first person. So
it looks just like Far Cry but Avatar.
Exactly.
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I don't think anyone was expecting anything else. And again, that's okay.
But this has sold me more on the idea that Far Cry but Avatar will be kind of fun.
Yeah.
I think it might be immediately a little bit more interesting than what we've been getting with Far Cry, just because it's not. It doesn't look like Far Cry. It may play like it, but it doesn't look like it, and that might be enough because Far Cry is starting to get a little played out.
Yeah.
Well, that started a little while ago, but it's continued to feel a little played out. So I think complete setting change, might be enough for some people.
And yeah, we're getting Ghost Runner 2. I think looks really good. So I just want to briefly mention it because I'm super excited to play this.
There's
the
a demo out.
Excellent.
Or at least there was a demo out, and that got positive reception, from what I understand.
Yeah, the demo's out now. That's what this trailer was for, is the demo coming out. Yep. I think very fun-looking game. Also coming out in October, which probably means I'm not going to play it until next year at some point because there's too many other things. But
we're full. Come back later.
Like the original Ghost Runner, I will play it far after it actually released and have a really good time, I think. Yeah, this wacky bit of them showing their controllers.
They're nice controllers.
We got a bunch of Helldivers 2 gameplay, which I think was interesting because they did the thing that we hate, Wyatt, which is gamer speak in the trailer.
Oh my god, it was so bad. And here's the thing. Gamer speak in trailers has been a long-running thing for a long time, but I feel like it kind of went away. This just brought it back in just full force. It reminds me of when they announced The Division and they just had the worst gamer speak that I've ever heard in my life. And everything else about this trailer looks neat. I'm down for another Helldivers
all this
game.
Gameplay looks really fun. I think the transition to third person looks like it's working really well.
Let's go check out that chest.
Wow, sick loot. Do you want this?
Oh,
the original Anthem thing where there was one gun. They were like, "Don't you want this specific named legendary thing?" And then nobody watching it knew what that was, so it didn't land at all.
It's like, I'm going to cover our right flank. No one says that. Literally.
Yeah, I want to see a realistic gamer speak one where
they still look out behind you and then call you a slur. That's the only gamer overlay speaking.
That is the CSG experience.
Not even professional CS:GO or Overwatch players talk like this. It's awful. But again, everything else about this looks neat. I was unsure of how a third-person Helldivers would go, just because I felt like the top-down co-op nature of it is kind of what made it kind of unique. But watching this, I was like, yeah, play this. This looks cool.
This is why the secret is this is just EDF. This is Earth Defense
I knew you were going to say that.
It kind of looks just like that, but a little bit smoother.
Looks like that. How dare you? I'm very excited to play this as well. I think this.
It also reminds me of that. Oh God, I can't think of the name of it. That one that just came out that was like EDF but first person, based on that movie.
Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers.
Thank you, Starship Troopers. Neat. I couldn't.
Well, that's because the first Helldivers was heavily inspired by Starship.
Oh yeah, this just and this just kind of looks like that, but kind of better. I don't know. I didn't play that Starship Troopers game, so it could be real good.
I
heard it was good.
So it's not actually out. Yeah, I've heard.
I heard it was good.
But
right. Well, this looks good too.
Yeah. I'm excited for it.
I'm excited to play this. I am concerned that because Helldivers is a very friendly fire focused game, and if it has a lot of open multiplayer, I would worry that we're gonna run into scenarios of just a lot of griefing going around, and I hope that's not the case because it can be really fun when you are playing it in the way they want you to play it. But
I haven't played the first Helldivers in a long time. Did that have like open lobbies and stuff? I don't remember.
It did, yeah. I
I
never
don't
really
know
had a bad experience on them, so I hope.
No, I didn't either. I don't know what the state of the community is in the year 2023, so it could be a complete
I think it
mess,
being third person now is going to make it appeal to a lot more people, which means we're probably going to get more bad eggs. But hopefully it's not too bad. Other big thing, of course, is Spider-Man 2. This is the big release in October for Sony, and it looks amazing. All the feedback that's been coming out from early previews has been very good. I think all the trailers that we've seen have been very good. So
I actually didn't watch this. Go ahead, sorry.
This is the thing. This is an Insomniac game, and they have not missed, like, ever.
Yeah.
I want to say maybe Fuse, if anyone remembers Fuse, but that wasn't really their. That was a weird situation, but like they don't miss. Like they have such a consistent track record, like high quality track record, that I feel like, again, kind of like Tears of the Kingdom, this might be one of like the safest bets of the year in terms of like just a game being good. Not that I advocate for pre-orders in any way, but
I feel like it'll be good if I get a PS5 and I'm able to play it. I saw someone's opinion on it from like one of the gaming channels that I watched recently, that they, from the preview that they saw, that they were hesitant about the amount of quick time events shown in the gameplay bit. Like it was much more quick timey than the previous two games.
I don't know. That was feedback that was also shown the first time Spider-Man 1 was shown off. People were like, oh, it looks like there's a ton of quick time events. It's going to be really dumb. And then when people played the game, they're like, oh, these are totally fine.
I know. They usually handle them well, and they're more...
I did actually think that, I would agree that kind of those games, their cutscenes are pretty quick time heavy, but they're not heavy on the cutscenes, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. When it works, it works really well. So.
I'm looking forward to this. I feel like this is one of those games where like you don't need to switch it up too much. You know, just kind of make small tweaks and little additions here and there, and I think you'll just have a good old time.
I didn't even watch this gameplay that they came out with here, literally because I was just like, oh, I know that's probably a day one buy from me regardless. So I was just like, I don't even need to see what's coming. If it's exactly like the last two and just a fresh story, I wouldn't even care.
Like, I don't need to be sold on this game. I just need to hope that it comes out and actually.
I mean, I'm close enough to wanting from it. I'm close enough to being sold on Spider-Man alone, and this one looks especially good.
So there's two things that I wanted in a Insomniac Spider-Man sequel. One was to switch between Miles and Peter Parker, which they're doing here. So, check on that. I wasn't asking for co-op like a lot of people were. I think that was a dream that was never going to happen. I've accepted it, and it's fine. This game doesn't need to have like co-op for it to be good. I'm just going to dismiss that. The other thing is, as much as I love that first game, and I still stand by that it is like the ultimate game that you can just pick up and play, and it's really smooth, and it plays so well. Every time I play that game, I'm replaying it right now, the stealth sections and the puzzles that they have annoy me a little bit more every time I go back to replay it, because it really does like halt the like forward momentum that the game has, because it's paced really well, but those stealth sequences and those puzzle sequences really slow things down.
Do you mean the ones you're playing as a different character?
Yeah, it's a neat idea, and there's one mission where I think they like there's a mission where you're playing as Mary Jane and you have to work with Spider-Man to take out targets. That was cool, but it's one mission, and all the other stealth missions are slow. Yeah, and I just feel like it didn't help with pacing.
I think it's going to depend a lot on your tolerance for those things, because I never have had an issue with them. But I also am a person that likes stealth games, So
I don't mind stealth. It's just it didn't feel entirely necessary a lot of the time, and it just felt like I'm fine with it in theory. I just feel like the execution of it wasn't like great for me. I hope that if they continue it, which I'm totally fine with them like continuing it, that they make them a little bit more interesting, because they do get more interesting as you go along, but it's a really slow ramp for that.
I'm hopeful that they'll be included and be more interesting. I mean, they could cut it entirely, and I wouldn't mind. But because of, I don't know, there's things that the Miles game, even though being basically just the same as the base Spider-Man game, does improve on, that I think with enough time like this, I hope that some of the weaker elements of that game are improved as well. Like the Miles game, I felt like the Spider-Man stealth sections were better because Miles could slip in between stealth and combat, where Peter, the moment he gets spotted, it's just combat. So I'm kind of hopeful that, they're able to take everything that was great about the original and make it a bit better, and anything that was a little weaker about the original, that they can just tweak and improve upon.
I mean, that's the hope for any sequel, right?
Do you think for the sequel they're going to keep that separated, as in only Miles can disengage from combat because of his invisibility?
I'm actually wondering if, because it seems like some missions are set to a specific character. Oh, I'm getting an ad on the Twitch stream. That's nice. Anyway, I'm almost wondering, because there's some missions that you clearly play as either character, if Peter might just have less emphasis on stealth.
Yeah, I feel like that'd probably be a good direction to go. And especially because we know Peter is getting the Venom suit in this game.
He's going to be all combat.
Fitting, right? Of like, he'd be more combat focused, unless Venom gives you some kind of stealth ability, which I totally could see happening. But I feel like we're more likely to see Miles be the more stealth character.
I think that would be the better route too, is to have both characters play very differently, so that there's more of an incentive from a gameplay perspective to switch between the two characters.
For sure.
That's the other question I have though. Like Venom, like confirmed, it's not just the symbiote suit. Venom is in the game. We've seen that very clearly. So how long for the, like, in terms of the entire playtime of the game, how long are we going to have those symbiote powers?
Yeah, I do wonder if it's a case of like we're going to end with them permanently, or maybe we'll have some justification for being able to go back to them, or maybe they're just going to be story mission things where you only get to use them during certain missions. So
we've also seen that Spider-Man, sorry, they're both Spider-Man, Peter has those Iron Spider arms. So I almost wonder if those will play a part somehow too. Maybe, once he gives up the Venom suit, he gets those, and it's a different skill tree or something as well.
Because I know that I know that some people would be disappointed by this, understandably, but I could see them like doing something where like it's only for story missions, but they give you the most insane abilities to kind of like accentuate those specific missions where you have it, because it would be weird to give you like a whole skill tree and then just like take it away.
I've got a bit of a wild plot prediction too. I don't know if we want to include those now or.
We can talk about them, I think, once the game comes out, just in case we accidentally stumble into the right thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't expect we will, but that is a risk.
This is extreme speculation, because they've really shown so little about this game, so.
And yeah, we'll get into it, I think, because I'm sure we're probably going to do a Games Club on this game too, because I think a lot of us are super into this.
Absolutely.
All right. So I believe the last big thing I wanted to talk about here is 7 Rebirth. So we're skipping over. Look, Foam Stars, I've actually heard is much better than we.
I don't
actually
believe it.
Hearing a lot of really positive things from people playing Foam Stars.
I can't believe it.
Which I'm in shock about. Legitimately in shock about.
I think those people are in too. I think they need medical attention.
I do remember watching that trailer, and I laughed out loud when they proudly stated as a feature that the game would have like 2 game modes. They're like comes with 2 whole game modes.
Game modes.
Yeah, wow.
I laughed out loud. I thought that was the funniest thing.
Yeah, I mean the marketing for this game's been wild, but Foam Stars, you know what? You do you, Foam Stars.
You do whatever thing you're doing. Go have fun.
Yeah, aside from that, the other oddball here is we got find it, Tales of Arise DLC coming out, which is bizarre because that game came out ages ago. Like this is a 2-year-old game, I think, that we're getting DLC for. It's a good game, and I'm happy to get the DLC, but it is bizarre to me that we're getting the DLC, and it's just DLC like 2 years later, and not a sequel game or something. It just seems odd, especially because Tales doesn't normally do DLC. So I don't know.
And it's
DLC,
not
hefty
like
DLC.
Not like an expansion or something like that.
Yeah, that's like the question is like, how big is it going to be? Because they don't normally do DLC, so we don't have a judging stick for it. Also, I do want to give credit to one thing in this Foam Stars trailer, which is these character panels coming on the side and then the barista door.
Yeah, okay. As a listen, as a fellow barista, this was great. I love being represented.
This to me is the single best character class that you could ever have in a game. The barista door with what looks like a crazy cannon with a coffee warning on it, and just wearing a gauntlet.
Is the joke there that there's like latte foam art?
I think so. I think so.
But maybe it's also that he's a matador because it's called the barista door. So I don't know. I just love that this frame exists in the game. It's very, very funny to me.
Bizarre.
All right. FF7 Rebirth, it's coming out in February. We get some really cool shots here of about what portions of the original FF7 this game's going to take place in. And it's a pretty large chunk of stuff. There's a lot of things going on here that I think are very exciting. I think this actual pre-rendered trailers here look much better than they did for FF7 Remake to begin with, and I'm excited to see how this translates to the PS5, because it felt like a lot of the time some of the limitations on FF7 Remake were just, it was having to be beholden to PS4 hardware and was having some issues. So I'm hoping we see a lot of better skyboxes in this one, because they were really pretty most of the time, but then occasionally you really could see those pixels. So
oh boy,
I gotta say, not to bring up Wyatt's hot take on FF7 Remake.
Oh,
every time I've seen footage for this, I feel like nothing. I don't know.
Wyatt,
and that's a very and let me explain. That's a very Wyatt opinion, because I know that Final Fantasy Remake was something that was like highly anticipated, and for a lot of people it met those expectations, and that's great. I don't know what's going on in this game anymore. I don't know what's happening.
This is your opportunity to learn, because the thing this trailer shows us is that nobody knows what's going on, because there's things in this trailer that absolutely did not happen in the original game and could not have happened. So I think they're just leaning into it. They're leaning into the idea that this is not going to be the exact same thing as the first couple of games, or the first game, which is super exciting, because I think it means they're leaning into the idea that the original game stands on its own and this can be a different experience, which of course means when certain things happen, they can hit even harder because you thought maybe they wouldn't happen.
Oh no. Oh no.
And I'm super glad that we got this confirmation that we're getting another honeybee style sequence in this game. That's exactly what I want.
It looks like we're getting like Chocobo Mario Kart, which I'm totally here for as well.
Yeah, so this was all in original FF7 Chocobo Racing and all the Gold Saucer minigames. The difference here is they confirmed that you're going to be able to go back to the Gold Saucer. You're not going to be limited to just doing it when you're there. So this is the part that's wacky. Now, they've shown it in the trailer. I also love this, Wyatt, because I remember your distinct hatred of the motorcycle minigame. The fight.
I want to be clear about something.
Happy it's back.
I want to be clear about something. I thought it was fun, I distinctly remember what it happens
really
like 2 or
long
3 times in the
boss.
game.
Yeah.
There's a stretch of time where it goes on for too long, and I became sick of it. I thought it was cool before that, though.
So
But it went on for
hoping
so
what we
long
get
where it just
here.
felt like I was pushing random buttons and not really
I'm
doing
absolutely
anything.
hoping what we get here is a bunch of like 2-minute long races that we can do, which looks like the case because this looks goofy and fun.
If you keep it to like tight, succinct, like a Naughty Dog style set piece where it doesn't overstay its welcome, I think then it'll be fine. It was just that last stretch. It went on for so long, and I wanted nothing more than for it to be over.
Yeah, the reason I've paused on this frame is because I just want to say Zach is clearly in this game, which doesn't make sense from the original, but does make sense from Remake's timeline. And I'm just very excited. I'm just very excited to see where all this goes.
Didn't they do like a Final Fantasy VII? What was it called? Crisis Core?
Yes, which I've put in and am ready to play.
So that probably explains why Zach's here. Probably.
I doubt it. Crisis Core is a prequel. It's not.
No, I think that the Crisis Core remake is just a straight remake of remaster of Crisis Core.
So they didn't do anything.
Crisis Core remake is a straight remake. It's a pretty substantial remake, but it is a different game. The stuff that explains this is at the end of FF7 remake. So this is that whole scene at the end of FF7 remake where Zack is standing there. That's where this is probably coming from. So I'm excited to learn what actually happened. I'm happy to see Rufus again because he was a very good villain for the little tiny bit of that game that he was in. Happy to see him be more villain.
There's some Organization 13 members, it seems.
Oh.
Yeah. Matt Mercer pops up at one point. As Vincent,
because of course he does. Because of course he does.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just very good, and I think this is leaning into what people had wanted to see from this game. So I'm hopeful that it actually delivers. Because Square Enix, sometimes they can be pretty hit or miss. And a lot of that is because there's different dev teams, but at the same time, I don't know. Forspoken Studio just got shuttered, so hopefully Rebirth lands and is going to be fine. Also, again, love that it's on 2 discs.
Can't believe that there needs to be a game on 2 discs.
What are they doing? Is it actually that big, or is it Titanfall 2 levels of uncompressed?
And what you got to know...
Titanfall 2 on 2 discs?
No.
But
okay.
Sound files made the game over 100 gigs.
A PS5 disc is 100 gigs. So that means it's over 100 gigs, probably somewhere in between 100 and 200. So I don't know. I'm very excited to play this game. Probably not going to get a disc copy because it seems like 2 discs is going to be wholly unnecessary, but at the same time, that would be very funny to have.
I'm going to have a fun time having it be the one thing installed on my launch PS5.
Like I put a new SSD in mine, and it's so nice to have a larger SSD. But all right, that was the state of play in the Nintendo Direct. So a lot of stuff that I think was... Most of these games are games we've heard about before. It was fun to see how they've been updated and whatnot, but nothing super crazy. And also, look, I love doing all these game presentations. Can we do them on like a weekend, maybe? Can we... swing that?
No.
So we actually have the option of doing a live reaction, but...
Yeah.
I'll be like in the middle of the workday and see a coworker or one of you guys or something say something about one of these directs or something. I'm like, oh well, I don't know. It's at like 1 p.m. I don't know where you thought I was gonna find the time on this Tuesday to watch it.
They're usually on days where I'm working, and it's like, all right, I got a 20 to 30-minute break where I just go down to the basement. I'm munching on my food. I got 20 to 30 minutes. Go. That's all I got until I get home.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was all of our thoughts on the Direct and State of Play stuff. We're going to end up talking a lot more about Spider-Man, I assume, and maybe some of the Mario stuff. It depends on if any of us play them or into these Mario games. But yeah, lots of Mario stuff, lots of Spider-Man, and lots of Final Fantasy, which is very exciting. All right. Let's move on to something that isn't very exciting, which is Unity adding a runtime fee.
Here we go.
Now,
allow me to take a sip before we start.
Yeah, really just down that entire thing right now, I think. So there's a timeline of events here that
I
happened.
should have brought a root beer over here.
Unity announced that they're going to institute in January of 2024, including retroactively on all versions of Unity that games have been made on, a 20-cent installation fee that starts once you've hit the threshold of $200,000 a million installs, I think is the threshold. You have to hit both of them. So the idea was it's not going to impact indie studios, but the actual reality is it's going to impact a ton of studios that are mid-size incredibly poorly. And especially any people that make free-to-play games are now just absolutely in the gutter because...
Including, I think it was said that the main targets of this were games like Pokemon Go and Genshin.
Yeah,
Pokemon
absolutely.
Go made on Unity?
Yep.
I had no idea. Yeah, that's got to be.
Yeah, so the big rumor is that this was done because of mobile free-to-play games like Genshin and Honkai Impact and all that use Unity because you absolutely like those games make tons of money and they have a massive install base, but the reality for those games is that their install bases are way larger than an average of 20 cents per user. It's also impacting a ton of devs that have made like cheap or free mobile games that hit a pretty large install base and managed to make just above the 200,000 line, but now have to face the problem of paying for free installs when they maybe got like 1 million installs, but the average user is not spending 20 cents in their game. They're spending less than that, which now means they're just making nothing. Like, you're going to end up paying more in royalty fees than you actually would for any sale because you're offering your stuff for free. So yeah, there's tons of problems with this that I think any game developer or people that work in like any sphere of games journalism, because everyone who saw this was immediately like, this is not going to work. This is not a long-term viable thing, because what's going to happen is every developer that could possibly be affected by this, especially the mobile free-to-play developers, are just going to swap to a different engine.
This fits that it's a decision made by a man who wanted to force Battlefield players to pay to reload their gun.
Yeah, that's one of the famous things that the head of Unity's stuff has said before. So,
well, you know what's funny is that the CEO probably also knew this wasn't going to go down very well because he sold a bunch of his stock right before this information hit the public.
it was like a lot of stock if what I read is correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe it was like 2,000 shares or something. It was a very funky amount. Obviously, we are not checking our information actively while we're talking about it, so we could be wrong on any part of this. But not a good look. A very bad look.
No.
Yeah.
Like
and the reason we're talking about this that I wanted to say is like all of us went through a game development college program and largely used Unity for most of our projects. So we've all got a solid 2 to 3 years of proper Unity experience under our belts, if not more, from doing stuff outside of college courses. We're all well past college at this point. But yeah, I think it is super clear to me that this is just a killer for Unity. Of anyone who sees this is going to know, and they can't walk it back is the problem, which they are walking parts of it back, and they've released a thing on Twitter that's like, we're going to share updates in the next couple of days. But the problem is, it doesn't matter what their updates are, they just shattered any trust that developers have in Unity, and I think this is going to cause people in years, maybe games that are currently using it will stay on it, but I imagine every time a studio that has a current Unity game that could have been impacted by this is just going to move to Unreal or Godot or one of the other many engines like GameMaker that are totally useful.
The important thing to keep... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really felt like Unity just became the biggest advertisement for Unreal.
Absolutely. It became the biggest advertisement for Godot and Unreal that you could possibly have.
Because the thing to keep in mind about Unity, for people who don't who have heard of it before but don't really understand its use case, right? Unity, from essentially from day one, has always been the game engine for indie developers because it is a very versatile engine. It can do a lot of different things, and it's often used for prototyping as well because you can get prototypes for mechanics, you can get things in the game and like mostly functional really, really quickly in comparison to other game engines. So it was always seen as such a good indie friendly option and a cost saving option as well, and something that is again very versatile. And
Yeah,
that
it had
was
little
that's
to
so
no.
much of its appeal. And now that you've added this, it's like gone. The entire like not the entire, but a large part of the selling point for Unity as a platform is gone now. Like obliterated in one day.
Yeah. It's not that people weren't paying for Unity before, because there was subscription fees to get Unity Pro if you made above a certain income, the same way that this has like an income and install threshold that did as well. This is just a lot more impactful for everyone, and it's also that they're applying this basically retroactively to any projects.
Yeah, where you
that are
could
released
use
Yeah, that's
any release of Unity before and have like things from
Yeah,
that
which is
version
also
apply.
almost certainly not going to hold up in court. Like,
I was gonna say that seems super scummy because like developers can have games made years ago and completely out, and even like no longer pushing out updates for them, but want the game to be out there, and that's going to retroactively apply on some like contract they didn't sign, potentially even that they already paid for Unity to some extent.
Yeah.
Just seems weird.
Yeah, especially because it had such a short turnaround time. They wanted this policy to kick in January of 2024, which means any developers currently halfway along a game project probably wouldn't have had any option to switch. Yeah. So you're just basically pulling the rug out from under people.
Which is probably, hundreds of games.
Yeah, absolutely. If not thousands. So
yeah, exactly.
I think it's absolutely a case that this is just a very short-sighted and silly move to make that is going to cause such a massive loss of trust. Even if they walk it back at this point, like that loss of trust is not going to go away, because games are made in the span of years and not weeks or months. So it's likely that in a couple of years they would think, oh, it's been a few years, people probably have forgotten about this. Game developers aren't going to forget because they're making games that take years to make, and so they have to be hyper aware of where any of these policy changes might come from. Yeah, it's just wild. It's a wild situation that shouldn't have happened.
It's essentially a punishment for being successful.
Yep.
Especially for games that have already, like Alex mentioned, had come and gone. It's like, now you're being punished for how successful a previous game is, and you have to pay us potentially millions of dollars. Like, imagine how that must feel for an indie developer where it tends to be margins are tight and you have to save money where you can, and then all of a sudden this previous success you had years ago that everyone's probably very proud of and very happy about its success is now coming back to bite you in the ass. Like, imagine how that must feel.
Yeah, and imagine how many, it's not common, but there's got to be a handful of games that their success came out of nowhere. It was made, imagine probably all of us have had a game published to some extent in Unity. Just a college project, but imagine for some reason one of those games took off and had whatever. I don't remember what the threshold that Ryan just said was, but yeah, $200,000
installs.
Yeah, so one of those games surpassed 1 million installs. I don't know. Somebody played it on Twitch, and suddenly your game's a hit. Awesome.
Which
and
does
then
happen.
Now
and did happen to multiple games at our college. Like that is absolutely happens with student projects.
Exactly. And so imagine if you built this game on a budget of like $5, and built the game in Unity because it was free, and your game was an unexpected hit, and now what, I don't know how long it's been, a number of years later, suddenly you're gonna have to pay like a pretty hefty sum.
Yeah, I mean there are
Seems-
protections in place for that to not happen. Of it only takes the install thing only counts for after the 2024
Okay.
date, so it's not retroactive.
still,
and you
you
still
could-
also have to hit that $200,000 threshold. It's not an either or. It's you have to hit both.
Okay.
So
Well, still.
in that scenario, it's still bad. It's not as bad. But I think again, like the biggest hits here are going to be games releasing after January.
Mhm.
Like what options do they have? Because it's super disheartening, I think, to see all of this happen. And yeah, I absolutely would be concerned about any
And
reactions to this.
To me too, think about how many like indie studios teams probably dissolve like after the game comes out. You know,
Yep.
finally it comes out and you just part your ways. And now you're gonna have to figure out like retroactively, like, oh wait, our game's a success. That's great. Now we have to figure out our whole financial situation because
Mm-hmm.
of like it's crossed this threshold. A real sort of, it would be a really
It basically means you have to have an accountant.
bittersweet moment
if your team
because
didn't have an accountant. So
yeah, exactly.
which is probably it's a
hopefully
good thing to
with-
have one anyway. But at the same point, if this is impacting a lot of smaller indie teams, yeah, I just think this is an absolutely crazy, short-sighted change.
And not to say if you have a successful game you shouldn't pay for the engine, but the way they're going about it seems bizarre.
Especially because it's a per install fee. And this is the other half of this problem of like, if this was released to be it's a per sale for like, as long as the purchase cost is above $1 or something,
Mhm.
we'll take a cut off of it.
Which that was the former way it was done, right?
I'm going to
Unity?
clarify, but so the way Unreal does it, Unreal has a 5% royalty, which is like 5%. It's a big amount of money if you're having any large thing, but it's a percentage, so you are always aware that you can pay that, right? Like it's never going to hit you with a number that you weren't expecting. For an install thing, it absolutely will hit you with numbers that you're not expecting because first of all, one of the things that's the sketchiest about this is Unity has like a fact statement that might be taken down now of what actually triggers this pricing and how they calculate it. And the way that they phrase how they calculate installs is just super sketchy because it's like we're estimating based off of market data and a bunch of stuff how many installs you have.
Estimating.
Which is bizarre. Like that is an absolutely insane way to do it because I mean obviously people don't want them having
You are
to
charging
be making
people
online games, but
life-threatening money for a guess.
I had assumed they were gonna have some whack DRM or something just to track how many installs were going. Bizarre.
yeah, it's just
Hadn't seen that.
really, really bizarre. Yeah, it's supposed to take place in January 1st and all of that. It's just really, really not a good thing. And there's like tons of fact about this. And the way, so here, I'll read this directly off of Unity's fact, which is, will installs of a demo or game in open access or beta count towards the Unity runtime fee? If a user can access a full game, then installs count towards the fee. If a user can't access the full game, then that demo would be a separate package and not count toward the fee. Early access games are not considered demos. In addition, we don't intend to capture or count installs for QA testing. So this is the other like bizarre thing of here. Technically, that's like, okay, it's not going to charge me for demos, but then they have to specify that they're not intended to capture install QA test installs. Like, how would they even track that to begin with? Which is bizarre. Yeah.
Well, there's like almost sinister implications to that, in a way.
Yeah, and I just feel like their phrasing of that feels really weird and kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
You know, the whole like can access the full game. Well,
Mhm.
what are they counting as the full game?
Yeah, they also specify they don't track identity across devices. So if someone installs the game 4 times on 4 different devices, guess what? You charged 4 times. Like, that's also just bizarre. It's it's a crazy way of doing a DRM type thing. Yeah, it's just an absolutely crazy thing. And then they also specify that they're not going to charge for reinstalls, which is, again, how are you tracking this? Like, how does any of this get tracked in a way that is not super intrusive?
Yeah. Are we going to have some, like, Call of Duty kernel-level anti-cheat just to install a Unity game?
Yeah, which is bizarre. Yeah, this is just a crazy situation, and we're going to get an update on this because Unity has already said that they're taking some time to review these and actually are going to release an update. It's probably not going to be sufficient, is my guess, and I think
absolutely
Unity
not.
Has already...
Nothing will be at this point.
And
they dug their grave.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing too. Even if for whatever reason they've like rolled back this entire policy change, right? The fact that they even tried this to begin with is like
that's
such
the breach of trust.
Exactly. It's like, oh, okay, you've rolled those back, but this shouldn't have happened in the first place. This entire concept shouldn't have even crossed your mind as a possibility in the first place.
Yeah,
I mean, the current CEO of Unity was got out of EA because he was too greedy for them.
Well, he's also not a games person. There's been a bunch of articles about this because he has really not been a he has not had a lot of success in the gaming industry in terms of being someone that people liked having around. Yeah. So he worked as a contractor for a bunch of other stuff for a long time, but then he joined Unity in 2013, and he's absolutely been very destructive to Unity's business model in terms of anyone having faith in Unity and continuing to use them.
Why did they think it was a good idea to hire him?
I mean, he was successful. Like, he's a successful CEO, but you know, that means different things for different industries.
I was gonna say probably another out of touch executive made that decision.
well, that's the thing, is that a lot of people who are in those kinds of like positions don't really play games, or they don't have a lot of experience with actual game development, which is sometimes where a lot of miscommunication can come from, because you're getting a lot of sometimes mandates or whatever from people who don't really know what they're talking about. And a lot of kind of miscommunication can come from that.
Yeah.
Whether it's developer side, or you're creating a game engine or a platform of some kind, it always can cause a disconnect.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate: this does not mean go send Unity death threats, because that did happen, and it's always
God. Really?
It's absolutely not something to threaten people over. It's just a case of maybe consider using a different engine. I would encourage anyone who is a hobbyist or learning to look into learning Unity, not Unity, but Unreal or Godot. Unity is a useful skill set to have. Probably not going to make a ton of games with it outside of small scale development.
I mean, let's say you're just starting out, or you're just like a solo developer, or you just have a passing interest. Things like Game Maker is a great place
absolutely.
too. that's 2D development.
Game Maker, even RPG Maker, you can do some crazy cool stuff with RPG
absolutely.
Maker.
Yeah,
especially because I do feel like Unity has a fair bit of user base that's making that a similar kind of 2D game like that.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine replacement.
Unity was always like a good example of like how to start, but I think we're at a point now where there's so many other good places, to start your potential hobby, that Unity isn't
I
the
feel
only
like
option anymore. But
though it's a slightly more complicated engine. No, I don't need to get into engine debate here, but the blueprint system in Unreal can be very approachable for beginners.
Yeah.
And it's also extremely powerful. It's one of the best visual scripting things that is in basically any engine.
Great for beginners, great for everybody else too.
The nice thing with Unreal is Unreal's coding is extremely difficult, but it's also very true to what you might actually be doing in programming in proper games, because
it's also very, very well documented.
Well, not the programming. Blueprints are, but Unreal programming is not super well documented. But the you'll learn a lot from dealing with something that isn't well documented. You always learn more in these things if you're trying to challenge yourself, and Unity, for better and for worse, is often a less challenging environment. I think this in particular has just made it not as appealing to most people. So, yeah.
You know what? You know what's a shame too? There was a span of time in like the early 2010s to mid 2010s where Unity just had the worst reputation for the general population because it was seen as the engine you use for a bunch of asset flips and, cheap
Which absolutely
garbage.
is untrue. Like,
absolutely, 100%. And it took a while for like people, because there's a lot of games that come out that people don't even realize is on Unity. Like, because I distinctly remember I would have so many conversations with people that are like, oh yeah, you go to game designer school, they make you use Unity. I'm sorry, it's like, you do realize that Hearthstone was made on Unity, right? Grow Home was made on Unity. So many excellent, fantastic games have been made with that engine, like I said before, because it's such a versatile platform. And now its reputation is in the crapper again for a completely different reason.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
It's still perfectly usable, just you might not want to.
You just might want to keep some spare change off to the side.
Especially, I think if you ever plan on making something that is free to install, in particular, is now incredibly risky.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be killer.
So, I imagine.
I don't know how you take a game, like if your game is already free to play or free to install, whatever. I don't know how now with that news you would sort of turn that around without screwing your player base.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you now just charge $1 every time someone installs the game? Like, is that the solution? Because that sucks. That's a terrible solution. But it is one of the ones that would work. So, I don't know. This is a thing that just universally pushes the industry into bad reactions. It's not something that I'm happy about. And I think most people are absolutely super upset about this.
This is one of those things,
especially.
This is one of those things where I haven't seen a single defense of this whatsoever. I haven't seen a single
clearly,
person
even the CEO knew it was going to be a risky decision.
Yeah. The best thing you can say about this is it's maybe not as bad for some people as for others. Like,
yeah,
you'd be like, it probably won't impact a lot of devs, but at the same time, it's all install based, so you can never be sure that you're not just getting completely screwed.
Well, that's the other interesting part, right? Like you said in the very beginning, it's meant to target very specific games, Genshin Impact, that sort of thing. It's like, listen, if there's very specific games where you think this business model actually makes sense, then you don't have to make it this blanket policy for every game, because it's not going to work for every single game that comes out. Because every game is priced differently, every game has different intent, every game has different numbers of audiences. It's not going to work as a blanket policy. That's the weirdest thing about it. You want to target specific games, that's probably going to cause its own issues, but it's going to be a lot less ludicrous than trying to apply it to everyone.
Especially because there is a way to do a blanket policy that works a lot better, which is just attach a royalty fee. Like, if that's what they were afraid of doing, they're in just a super weird position now of like,
yeah, that's something that, like, I feel like, it'd make news. It'd be, Unity's changing up the way it's
but it wouldn't have ostracized your entire
developer base. And that would be the
base.
end of it.
Yep. It absolutely would not have been such a huge reaction.
Especially if it's a royalty fee, like we've said, that's actually a very common practice with a lot of other game engines. So it would be introduced, people would be like, oh, this is a thing that we have to deal with now. But it wouldn't be such a massive, like, visceral backlash.
It isn't the thing that stops you from making a profit. It's a small chunk of your overall. It's bizarre that Unity pulled this, and it's super ill-advised. Don't know what else to say about it. I'm sure we'll talk about whatever the response is and whatever gets walked back, but This, I think, has shattered trust in the engine, and that's really, really, really bad, because it means long-term, games are made over the course of years. We may not see the fallout from this for a couple of years, but I imagine it's going to be a lot of people that are encouraging people to learn game development are now not going to encourage them to learn Unity, like we just did. Like,
this almost reminds me of our episode we had a while back where we talked about Wizards of the Coast and their D&D changes.
Absolutely, this is exactly like the
that
OGL
was
thing.
the other thing I was thinking of. I'm just like, there was another like big betrayal of trust recently.
Yeah, all of a
Absolutely.
sudden I was getting
industry.
deja vu.
Yeah.
Like, for completely different reasons, but I think very comparable situations of as soon as you pull the trigger on that type of thing, you've lost a huge amount of trust.
Yeah, I do actually feel like Wizards walked it back so far that they were able to maintain some trust, so we'll see if Unity's able to do the same, but...
And the problem with Unity, the thing they would have to do, I think, to actually get this trust back in a way that is meaningful, is they need to put a hard statement that is changing their terms of use so that if you are using a version of Unity, they cannot retroactively apply a fee change to you. You stick with whatever the original agreement you made was. And
I can't imagine... I think you mentioned this earlier, Ryan. I can't imagine that one wouldn't... somebody wouldn't try to sue Unity over that, and I'm not sure that would hold up.
Yeah, bizarre situation. All right, well, let's talk about some fun stuff. We got another half an hour of podcast time left. So let's talk about some games that we've been enjoying playing, because I think pretty universally all three of these games that we're going to talk about, we've all enjoyed having some time with, which is Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core 6, and Starfield. At least Armored Core 6 and Starfield we're going to have dedicated episodes for, so we're not going to go super in-depth. But let's go in release order for these games. So Baldur's Gate 3 released last month. I think at this point, those of us that have been playing it have had a good amount of playtime in Baldur's Gate 3. Though I think a lot of us have also moved to play Starfield in the middle of a Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough and are going to go back to it afterwards.
Yeah, it's kind of destructive.
That's why I haven't played Starfield much.
Good on you for your restraint, but I'm different.
I haven't played Baldur's Gate. I might be the only person here who hasn't played Baldur's Gate. So I have a question, because this is a sentiment that I've seen online as it relates to Starfield, and I want to get your guys' take on it, right? This is how I'm going to contribute to this conversation.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of people where they're like, "Oh, I went from Baldur's Gate to Starfield," and it's like for a lot of people, they were like, I didn't really stick to Starfield that much. For a lot of people, it's like Baldur's Gate with all of its like choices, RPG elements, and how in depth everything is. It's like ruined Starfield for me, and it's like I can't go back to. It's like I'm not gonna keep playing Starfield. And I was wondering, as people here who has played both, what your take on?
I don't think so. I think they're very different games.
Yeah, I understand where that perspective comes from, though, because I do think for a lot of people, Starfield, the marketing for Starfield was like way above what Bethesda has done in the past, because they have the full backing of Microsoft right now. So I think a lot of people that wouldn't have been playing Bethesda RPGs wound up playing Starfield, which is a great thing. Like, try games that you don't normally play, but I think it also means people came in with expectations that were not colored by Elder Scrolls, but were colored by Baldur's Gate. And
there were a lot of people who thought this was going to be a space exploration simulator.
Which, to be fair, the marketing was misleading about that. That is absolutely a fair complaint to have. That we'll get super into that, I'm sure, in the Starfield discussion. But aside from that, if you came in expecting a Bethesda RPG, Starfield's super satisfying. If you came in expecting Baldur's Gate again, I can see why you'd be disappointed, but at the same time, that expectation was probably a bad one to have brought into it.
Would you say that's their fault, or is that Starfield's fault?
Not the Baldur's Gate comparison. I think the Baldur's Gate comparison is an unfortunate reality of these games releasing a week apart, or 2 weeks apart. It was unavoidable just because of the release dates. So it's the same thing that you see anytime, like Titanfall and Battlefield launch next to each other. Even if they're not super comparable, they're both in the same large genre.
First-person shooters.
So we're going to lump them in together and then judge them based on each other rather than judging them on themselves. And I think that absolutely happened with Starfield. And to a degree, I think it kind of reverse happened to Baldur's Gate, because I think a lot of the reaction to Starfield has been, oh, this is a surprisingly bug-free game. And then going back to Baldur's Gate, people are like, oh, this is a surprisingly buggy game.
Especially at that point, you're probably further into Baldur's Gate 3, and it
Absolutely.
just gets buggier.
Which is part of why I think a lot of people have done what Alex and I did, which is put a Baldur's Gate playthrough on hold to play Starfield, because we're waiting for some patches. Because I have run into more bugs playing Baldur's Gate 3 than I have Starfield that are more disruptive to my playthrough. None that are like game breaking, but
there have been like one or two mildly infuriating bugs in Starfield. The rest have been hilarious Bethesda bugs for me. There was one nearly game ruining bug in Baldur's Gate 3 that made me very close to like just hating the game and not being able to play it. And that was something that they fixed. Thank God.
It was that you short characters can't kiss right in romances.
No.
Game
but
ruining.
I'm very glad I didn't choose a halfling now.
It's
no,
fixed.
it was how do I so there's a feature in it called karmic dice that prevent both you and the AI from being able to have streaks of both good and bad luck. So you can't like roll 3 nat 20s or 3 nat 1s in a row or something like that. That was horribly broken for a good few people, to the point where if you had karmic dice on during one of their updates, it would almost double enemy damage and action economy, and it would force them to crit more and you to constantly fail.
I certainly didn't experience that, but
And
that does sound awful.
I struggled through 2 encounters trying to figure out what was going on when I just couldn't roll well. There were for the about 7 or 8 attempts, of which it took me 17 total attempts to complete this encounter because of this bug. I could not roll above a 10 on any of my characters.
Oh God.
And Shadowheart, who is also just notoriously not able to hit anything for a bunch of people. Like, for some people, she's an MVP. For a lot of people, she has never hit once
yeah,
in
for
the
me,
game.
she is the MVP of my party, but that's because of one particular spell that I'm abusing.
Is it Spirit Guardians?
Absolutely, it's Spirit Guardians.
The moment you said that, I knew what it was.
During this bug, she rolled. So, average combat encounter in D&D, and in this encounter, it takes about 3 turns for something to stay fresh, for players to not get bored of it, things like that. Taking that into consideration as an average, and the amount of times that I tried this being like the 7 or 8 length, 7 to 8 length, Shadowheart rolled a nat 1 on each of her 3 turns. Almost all of those 7 to 8 attempts.
See, this is the problem with dice roll bugs, is because we never know if for some reason you're just the one in like a trillion person who had this happen, or if it was actually a bug, and that's hilarious to me.
Yeah, because I never experienced that, but that does definitely sound like a bug.
She is, and I can never trust her character again. So she is staying in the camp when she isn't story relevant. I'm the cleric now. Bye.
Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate 3 absolutely has had more impactful bugs, but I feel like I'm really, really curious to see what Game of the Year conversations look like this year, because I think what most front runners are going to be, I think it's very clearly Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3. So I'm curious to see what other games push into that conversation. If we're gonna see Final Fantasy in there, if we're gonna see
I was gonna say Final
Starfield in
Fantasy
there.
16, I think, is a pretty strong contender.
But at the same time, 16 was pretty polarizing, which is often
That's true.
not great for a Game of the Year candidate. Because like
Well,
I've
you
had a
say
phenomenal
that.
time.
You say that.
Yeah.
Gamers will never ever forget the fact that Last of Us 2 won Game of the Year. Probably the most polarizing video game ever made ever. So you say that, but I don't know.
I feel like
think for Last of Us Part 2 especially, that's just a case of the critical and audience reception were super misaligned.
I do feel like regardless of your opinion on the game, though, too, Last of Us 2 is a technically extremely well-made game. So, like,
absolutely.
Disregarding your opinions on the writing and the plot.
I mean, you're talking to a bunch of
You just dredged up bad things. I looked to see which year that was and remembered it's the year that it snubbed Hades.
Oh,
it snubbed Hades and Ghost of Tsushima. Look, I like Last of Us Part 2, but still.
No, that's what I was about to say, Alex. You're talking to a bunch of Last of Us 2 fans, so you're preaching to the choir for sure.
I would have given it
because I like that game
for sure.
I probably would have also given it.
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
I don't know if it would have been my game of the year, but I like that game.
Yeah. Back on topic for Baldur's Gate 3. I am super curious, just because I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a lot of people's first exposure to CRPGs for really good reason. Because it's a super well-made game, and it looks very pretty, and it plays well. And that's often the killer for CRPGs, is they lack multiple of those things. They either don't look good or they don't play well. And Baldur's Gate 3 absolutely does hit on both of those fronts. So
from your experience, would you say that it's one that's like relatively easy to get into compared to other like CRPGs?
I think so.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was sort of about to say something along those lines. I think I may have mentioned this before in the podcast, so sorry if anybody's having a binge of episodes. But
it's a callback.
I think that Larian, what they've done with both Baldur's Gate 3 and with Divinity Original Sin 2 is a really much more modern take on a CRPG compared to many of the CRPGs out there. If you're to play Pathfinder is really good and fairly modern, and a lot of these games are, but many of the games still stick to a formula that is very similar to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, very similar to Planescape, Torment, and a lot of those foundational CRPGs. And I feel like
Kingmaker.
Yeah, that game's great. But anyway, like I think that Divinity and Original Sin 2, I haven't played the earlier ones, and Baldur's Gate 3 are a much more modern feeling game and approachable game than some of the CRPGs that are very much in the vein of CRPGs that came.
I think D&D 5e is an exceptional system for being good, easy to approach, but still having complexity that people want from a CRPG compared to Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, and Kingmaker. I think are a good comparison, because those two games are, I think, overall super good and very, very detailed and have tons to offer, but they're also focused on a very different thing, which is more like old school CRPGs. They're really about like progressing to that epic level of play where you are doing like you're fighting gods and fighting things on a level that Baldur's Gate 3 is not attempting to go for, probably for the better.
It's a level 20 end game compared to a level 12.
I mean, Pathfinder is also like Wrath of the Righteous is beyond level 20. It is, you get mythic abilities, which are bonkers, and it's more of like you are fighting armies at that point, not individuals.
I do also feel like those games are a bit more, Baldur's Gate 3 is very much based on the 5th edition rule set, but makes tweaks
that are very good for video gamey stuff.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Now, I mean, 4th edition...
I'm still a little salty that you can't use rope at all in the game, though.
I am salty about that. I wish we had a hook that we could attach to it and just set a rope down in a cave. There's
an area.
Where's my 10-foot pole, Larian?
Where's my immovable rod?
There's an area in one of the dungeons in Act 1 where it looks like, oh, the clear, obvious answer here is to use rope. There's rope nearby that you can pick up, and a cliff that's going to, you're going to take about 20 fall damage if you do this. There's no potions of feather fall or anything nearby. There is a rope that you cannot use.
Absolutely, that rope seemed like that was the thing that it was there for. It was for you to knock it down or something, but you just can't. I think with Pathfinder, what you're looking at is a much more complicated character building process that is in general very rewarding, but is a lot. Like Pathfinder, you really want to have a character build decided on early because you need to go towards it every level. 5e, you have a lot more ability to do things like multi-classing and it not feel super dangerous to your character's ability to actually complete content.
Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate 3 lets you respec your character at any time for a relatively inexpensive fee.
And part of the reason for that too is that like both Baldur's Gate that's based on 5e, Pathfinder is very heavily based on the Pathfinder, rule set. And Pathfinder is based off of D&D 3.5, which is compared to 5e much less streamlined. So you're going to get a game that is a little bit more detail oriented, a little more
in the systems.
Yeah, it's more customizable and less streamlined for sure.
Both of those Pathfinder games, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, but I'm fairly certain are both based on first edition Pathfinder, which is more similar to 3.5 and less streamlined
than second edition Pathfinder, which is the current edition of Pathfinder. So it's also a case of those games are designed around being played real time and not paused. So you can do a turn-based mode in both of them, and I would suggest playing them that way for the most part. But it takes them from 50 to 60 hour RPGs to 200 hour things, because obviously turn-based slows down how fast you're going to beat the game because you're thinking about what you're doing every move instead of letting it play out in real time. And that's the case with Baldur's Gate as well, of like you're seeing people spend 200 hours in this game easily. So
I've seen people with well over 200 hours in Act 1.
Yeah. Like
I had like 8 hours in Act 1, maybe even.
I was going to say I've reached 30 and I'm almost about to get to Act 2.
Yeah, I think I was about at like 25 when I moved to Act 2.
I breezed through Act 1, I will fully admit, because I had played so much of it in early access. I was just so eager to get to the new content, even though it's much updated and a lot newer in there. I knew the paths forward, and I just followed them.
Yeah, but I feel like overall we're all pretty positive on our Baldur's Gate 3 experiences so far, and looking forward to more.
Except for the bugs with the dice. God, I don't like when dice hate me.
I don't see another game coming in and beating that out as my game of the year. But we'll see. I really like Spider-Man.
Like I really like Starfield. I really like Tears of the Kingdom. I am probably really going to like Spider-Man, but Baldur's Gate 3, I think it is reviving the genre in a way that is going to be super impressive.
And to me too, Baldur's Gate 3, to me, is like, a lot of these games are going to be like, ooh, this could be game of the year. But Baldur's Gate 3 is almost like game of the last 2 or 3 years for me.
But it's also surprising because I think Baldur's Gate 3 does have a lot of problems, more than Starfield in a lot of ways. And yet I would still, I think, at the point I'm at in both of those games, I would probably still give Game of the Year to not God of War. For a second, I was about to say God of War. To Baldur's Gate.
That's a good game, too.
Great game. Deserves Game of the Year. It came out.
It continues the sweep.
Baldur's Gate 3, I think, is such a good experience, and I think we just often haven't seen RPG writing of that like quality level in a very long time. And there are problems, like all the companions are super horny all the time.
That was a bug too.
Please, I just want to be your friend. Stop.
But it was really fun.
See, Ryan, some people might find that as a positive. Though.
I thought Gale was gonna show me a magic trick, okay?
I'm like, oh, that's a real, because I'm playing a cleric of Mystra. I'm playing a trickery cleric, so which kind of makes Shadowheart redundant, but it's an interesting thing. And so I have an interesting relationship with Gale. I'm just like, yeah, we're cool best buds. You wait, you did what to my goddess? Oh,
yeah. There's.
I do feel like there's like
with that game.
Sorry, I can talk about Baldur's Gate 3 all day. So if we have to move on,
yeah, we'll move on.
But, we will.
Okay. I feel like the romance in that game is just a different. It was bugged, but it also has sort of a different philosophy than some other games, where like that game almost presents you with the option to go with any of the companions rather than like you having to seek out the option.
Yeah, for sure.
Like as long as you have a good relationship with the companion, the option will show up.
All right. Well, that's our Baldur's Gate 3 thoughts. I'm sure we're going to talk about it again at some point. It may just be further down the line as we actually get into finishing the game at some point. Let's move into Armored Core 6
You guys aren't
really
finishing the game?
They're finishing the game already? What's wrong with you? I'm going to do a quick bit on Armored Core 6. I think I'm the only one of this group that's been playing it. I just beat it for the third time today.
I played it a tad.
My God.
Yeah, so I reached New Game Plus Plus, which is our... for the games club that Brett and I are going to be doing on this. Yep. With different endings. Brett and I are doing a games club on this next week. We wanted to fully make sure we could talk about everything, so we did both New Game Pluses. So that'll be next week. We'll talk about the whole experience, but yeah, super positive on it overall. But I do think that From Software took some lessons from... I don't want to say Souls, because I don't actually think any of these lessons came from Souls. They came more from, I think, Sekiro, that probably didn't belong in an Armored Core game in the way that they used them, and led to some issues with balancing and some things that are just a little awkward. But Brett and I are going to go into huge detail about that, like, minor nitpick when we actually start getting into it, because it's absolutely not a case of, like, the game is not great because of it. The game is excellent. It just has a couple of issues, as most games do. But yeah, really good game. Had a great time with it. Super fun weapons. I'm glad mech games are back, and I hope more people make mech games after this, because Armored Core is very cool, and I want more stompy mechs.
Well, it's cool that we've in a way like gotten two. Well, hopefully it leads to two different genre revivals this year: the CRPG and the classic mech game. If these games go on to be continue to be as successful as they are, and it inspires others.
And to clarify for CRPGs have been in revival for a little while. What I want is more turn-based CRPGs and not real-time.
I'm right there with you.
In particular, because I think the real-time ones really just end up being super stressful in a way that...
To me, it really bugs me, too, that most of these CRPGs are adaptations of turn-based games that then turn them real-time.
If you're gonna do a real-time CRPG, come up with your own system that isn't based on a turn-based game, because... it really doesn't port as well as you would want it to.
Oh, look, the action economy. It's in shambles.
Oh, look, every 6 seconds, 8 things are happening, and every character on my screen is acting, and oh, I forgot to give an action to this one, so they're going to wait and sit and do nothing for the next 10 seconds. Yeah, bizarre. All right. Moving on to some Starfield impressions, because I think Wyatt's going to explode if we don't talk about Starfield
there
for a
we
little
go.
bit. Again, we're going to be doing a Games Club on Starfield probably in 2 weeks, so be ready for that.
That's the whole episode.
Yeah, that is the entire episode is a Starfield episode. Right now, I want to talk about it a little bit, because I think... Wyatt, have you finished the game yet? Have you done the main story?
No. I feel like I'm reaching the end, and I'm at a point in games like this where I'm not sure if I want to just beeline and get to the end of the story or keep going with other side quests.
Good question. That's up for debate. It depends on how you like to play games.
Yeah,
because I have seen
we're not going to get into any spoilers here for now.
But I'm very far along.
There have been a lot of opinions to whether or not if there's people telling you to rush through the main story and people telling you to take your time. do whatever feels right to you, because if you do one of the ones that doesn't, it is going to severely negatively impact the game feel and the
interesting.
the story.
Yeah, I actually do want to take a second to talk about that, because I think this is a super common thing. We saw a bunch of reviewers go, hey, you should rush the main story and then do your actual playthrough of New Game Plus. I mean, if you, for some reason, if you really want to do that, you're not going to have a bad experience, but you are going to not have, I think, the experience that the game wants you to have. And if you're more of a traditional Bethesda game person, I'm not going to spoil any New Game Plus actual things, but you don't get to re-choose traits or something. So if you want to make a different character, you're still going to make an actual new character and not do a New Game Plus run. So like, I did a New Game Plus run. I beat the game on New Game Plus, and then instead of continuing, I just made a different character because I wanted to mess with an actual new character, and now I'm just playing the game regularly again. And I think it is more fun to just play it regularly and get the actual experience. For me,
well,
at
and
least.
here's the and here's where I come from it. This is with the kind of campaign structure that we have here, and where it tends to put its focus. I think it's very worth it if you are gonna beeline the story. At least do some of the companion quests, because the thing is that the story is good, but I think the story is much better if you slow down and learn more about your companions.
100%.
And it's the exact same thing that I would recommend for something like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's main story is great, but I don't think you get nearly the same amount of impact at it if you just ignore all of the side stuff.
It's very much a character-driven story as opposed to an action one.
Yeah, and I think that's where you see a lot of
I would say the main
sentiment.
story is the main story is not very character centric, but doing the side content for your not even side content, but doing like the side missions for your NPCs, for your companions, really help fill out the story in a way that I think just beelining the main story doesn't.
Yeah, because there's a lot of complaints from people that I've seen that are like, you don't learn a lot about Constellation characters in the main story, because I rushed the main story and thought I would learn more about them, which is, I think, a very fair complaint to have, and maybe is something that Bethesda should take to heart for the DLC, of like, maybe people want to see more of the main companions in the main story. I think that's very fair. But it's also kind of antithetical to Bethesda's design of, like, the reason that's never a problem in Skyrim is because you don't have story companions. Like, until Dawnguard, where you have Serana, you really don't have a companion that is super story oriented, and people really like Serana. Like, there's a lot of love for a character that is super story based.
People have modded her to do so many things because she's one of the only okay written story characters in that game.
Yeah, because a lot of people assume that you just have Serana as your companion because she's basically the only companion that has that level of interactivity. Aside from like other modded companions, and I think it's
the only one I've ever used.
Yeah, and I think Starfield has done a good job of getting away from that idea, because all of the 4 Constellation companions have tons to say in all of the other side quest lines. Like, they often have like at least one line in a conversation in any of the other faction stuff, and so you learn a lot more about them through those missions than the main story. But of course, it's up to you on who you take with you. So if you don't take any of them on any of those, you're not going to learn that stuff, and it's going to make the game probably feel lonelier than it otherwise would. That also does bring me to my one major complaint, and I'm curious if anyone else here agrees with me on this. I really wish one of the Constellation members was at least more morally gray.
Yes.
I want a companion that will let me do piracy and has the level of interactivity of a Constellation companion, but isn't a goody two-shoes, and there's really no one.
Yeah, getting into that would be a little spoilery, but there's one that's almost there.
As someone who normally doesn't play games like this as a inherently evil character, I completely agree with you though, because you have to be able to represent every player in that aspect.
Especially because an entire faction is a pirate faction. Like, you will end up doing piracy in the pirate faction, and just not having a companion that you can take on those missions, because you want to take your companions because they have cool dialogue, but you don't want to take your companions because they're going to hate everything you do during the mission.
And especially because they make it very clear in the story. It's like, listen, we're Constellation, but anything you do outside of Constellation is not our concern. Which basically they're giving you full access to be a dick outside of Constellation while still allowing you to be part of it. At least that's what that dialogue line that they have implies. So it would be totally, because I thought, like, it's like, okay, I've met Barrett, I've met Sam, I've met Sarah. These are all like people with the exception of Sarah, who is sometimes like a freaking robot. You have the other characters who have some moral ambiguity. And then when I met Andreja, I was like, okay, this is going to be the character that's going to kind of represent those, like, she's going to be the companion for those players that want to be a little bit more morally dubious. But no, not really. She's kind of, at least where I'm at in the story, she kind of walks that line. She kind of walks that line.
It's also a case of, like, the reason we bring Andreja up here is because she is in the mission that you meet her, which is not super far in the campaign or anything, so no spoilers, but you meet her on a mission, and the big intro scene of you meeting her is her gunning down 2 enemies, and then your companions are like, oh, well, that's not good. And the entire time that was happening, I'm just like, we've done that at every location that we've gone to. We have murdered everyone.
Yeah.
Barrett, you literally helped me pump lead into 50 people.
Yeah, it's not like she was killing innocent people. She was shooting enemies.
You were killing people leading up to that very interaction.
Yes, like
you were shooting tons of people. There's a story mission that I think I've already talked to at least Ryan about this. I think I've talked to Alex about this, but there's a story mission where if you have Sarah as your companion, and also especially for me, where Sarah is your romantic companion, there's a certain part in the story where you're like, this makes no sense. Anything that's coming out of Sarah's face right now makes absolutely no sense and is not in line with her character or anything we've been doing for the past 20 hours leading up to this. And it was, like, infuriating.
Yeah, there's definitely a few cases like that. It's also, I think Andreja is another good example because she has a bunch of lines about House of Arun, because it's kind of her faction that she's related to. And you can pick at character creation that you are a House of Arun member, and she has basically no dialogue in that conversation about you being a member of that same faction, which is bizarre just because of what the conversation's about. So I think there's a lot of cases here that have not been accounted for and probably should have been, but at the same time, none of them are big issues. Like, it's just minor inconveniences or disconnects. On the gameplay side, because I think we're going to talk a lot about the story when we actually get into this in the full episode. I want to talk about gameplay a bit, because I think this is the thing that's been super polarizing for a lot of people, particularly exploration. And I have to say here, I think exploration in this game, largely worthless.
Yeah.
If you feels like there's no reason for you to be somewhere, there isn't a reason for you to be somewhere. And that's not to say that, like, I hate that, but there's
that a bunch of your time is spent in loading screens and menus, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you like the menus for it. And
I totally understand. I totally understand that too. For me, that hasn't really gotten in the way of either my enjoyment of the overall game or my immersion of the game either.
And that's why I bring it up, because I think for me as well, that's the case of I loved No Man's Sky. I have very much enjoyed time with No Man's Sky. Like, Wyatt, you and I have played it together a bunch before and had great times with that game. We didn't come in expecting Starfield to be No Man's Sky, and I think it is fair that maybe the marketing led people to believe that there would be more of this, and I think that's totally a fair complaint. But I am glad it didn't land on that side, because I think the content that is hand done here is at a quality level that Bethesda often struggles to achieve. Like, it feels like everything here is more high quality than most of Skyrim, at least base game stuff. So I think a lot of Dawnguard and Dragonborn in Skyrim, the expansion stuff, was very good. But the base game stuff was largely of a quality level. It's just not bad, but just middling. Like, you just don't feel anything playing it. Whereas multiple Starfield quests, like, I played through them, including side quests, and at the end I had, like, that was really cool. Like, I had an actual emotional resonance with the things that just had happened. And I think that's really good. I think that is super valuable for Bethesda to have achieved, and I hope they keep that going. But I do think that meant the exploration went by the wayside in a lot of places.
Speaking of exploration, do you guys find any value in scanning things?
No, absolutely not.
See, I think it's fun. I think it's like a fun kind of thematic thing. When I think of like space anything, I think of, like when you think of Star Trek, when you think of anything, I think of people constantly landing down on a new planet and scanning things and like learning more information about the planet. Largely useless. If you
I wish
completely
we had a
scan
mission
a
to do
planet,
that, and maybe we do. Maybe there is a mission somewhere that requires you to scan things.
There are missions, I guess.
Yeah, I know you can
you
get the
get
mission board
scan things from
constellation missions
well,
to
you get
scan stuff.
things from science outposts too that are.
But you can
random
also, in the
quests.
basement of Constellation, there's a mission board that gives you like survey missions where you can go survey a planet. But it's not very rewarding.
If you complete planet survey data, you can sell it to Vlad for a good chunk of credits.
Yeah, but it really is like that is the only reason to do it. I think a lot of the outpost management stuff that would hook into that is not super fleshed out and probably needs something like a Hearthfire to actually feel like it's worth doing.
I'm going to say this right now. Speaking of outposts, I have barely touched outpost stuff.
I haven't at all. I don't know how to start it.
I think part of that, I've done a little bit of it. I like tried it a couple times just to see how you can mine resources that you can't like mine on the surface of a planet. But outside of that, I just haven't really taken the time to like look into that much. Yeah. And not because I think it's poorly done. I think like from a UI and like usability perspective, it is so much better than Fallout 4 because Fallout 4's was like infuriating, and this is a much smoother...
And notably, we haven't played a ton of Fallout 76 because I have heard Fallout 76 has a much better settlement UI.
I can attest to that. It is Fallout 4 system, but less infuriating and way more options. I didn't like it very much in Fallout 4, though I did do some of it. I actually find it quite engaging in Fallout 76.
Well, it's also...
I'm glad to see that Starfield is actually giving it a point, sort of.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's just far more thematically makes so much more sense in Starfield than it has in like any Fallout game.
Yeah.
At least to me.
And I wish they gave you more reason to do it because it does feel like there's a lack of actual benefit to doing a lot of the settlement building stuff just because like the sell value for your materials is always so low that it doesn't feel worthwhile for the money, which is like what you'd think the main reason would be. It doesn't feel worthwhile for crafting because it's easier to just go buy the resources for pennies, basically.
Well, and that's the thing.
And when you complete an outpost, it's just going to act as an enemy attack magnet.
And the other thing too is that I feel like, especially for the first half of the game, like what you're going to be mining those resources for is to upgrade things, but there's not a lot of things to upgrade in the early game because you have to spec into it, which I like that you have to spec into, and I'm sure we'll get into that. You have to spec into pretty much anything in this game. But what that means is I feel like for anyone who's going to be doing outpost development purely from just like a gaining resources perspective, you're not going to be doing it for a while because there's not a lot to throw resources into that you need to get right.
Yeah, it's by the time I got to the point where I felt like I had enough startup to build an actual outpost, I already had a tier C ship and like the best stuff that I could have had. So
yeah, I think it really is there.
What should have been the point to like improve it was just not there. So
yeah, I think at this point it's there for people who want to scratch that Sims itch in Starfield. And I think for a lot of people, like, because that was a big thing in Fallout 4, and I think it's a big thing in Fallout 76, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that just enjoy it because they like building settlements and like, you know, like I said, they want to scratch that Sims itch, and I totally understand that. I just, from a practicality standpoint, you know, there's a bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah. And I'm hoping they expand on it eventually. Same with the shipbuilding. I think a lot of stuff in shipbuilding's biggest problem is kind of the inverse of Outpost, where I think Outpost, the UI is fine. It just isn't super functional. For ships, it's the opposite.
Oh boy.
Ships are really functional, but the UI just doesn't give you the information that you need.
It is awful.
Because considering that you're building what is basically your player home for most of the game, it is atrocious that you cannot like preview interiors. It doesn't tell you like what crafting stations rooms have, because rooms will have different crafting stations. You see a lot of like the ship benefits of like, this gives you extra crew slots, this gives you extra passenger slots so you can do missions to ferry passengers back and forth. But it's just actually like the information that I most want, which is what does the interior look like and what crafting stuff does it give, and especially like where are the ladders going to be, is just unavailable, and it's super frustrating. It meant that like once I got a ship together that had all the ladders in a nice row, I have not touched it since because I don't
have you guys figured out how to paint spaceships yet?
Yeah.
I haven't. How do you change the color?
You have to select a piece, so you like double click and you'll select something, and then you can change it.
Yeah, I think you hit J on keyboard and mouse, and then it opens up like a color palette.
There's like a command to select everything too, so you can paint your whole ship at once. The coloring works pretty well. It just is a weird keybind. And yeah, I found ship building worked better on a controller than keyboard, which was weird.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I don't want it to seem like we're not like we're focusing on a lot of the frustrating things, which is important to talk about. But I want to say overall, I kind of love this game.
Yeah, let me read off how many hours I have in Starfield.
Yeah, hold on.
Like 3 weeks after.
Let's see here.
99, which for me is a lot to put a new game in
a
short amount of time. Like a 3-week period.
Let's see here.
And I have every intent to make that number get a lot higher.
So I currently have.
Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah, I plan to do a lot more. Currently, I have 3 days, 22 hours, and 20 minutes.
How long do I have in Starfield?
Yeah, overall, I'm really enjoying it. I think there's a lot of areas for improvement, but I'm
77 and a half.
Yeah.
Nice. You almost had Fallout 76.
The thing for me, I talked about this with Ryan for a little while. It was like a half awake rant that I had one time. I was very excited for this game, and I do enjoy a good Bethesda RPG, but I think ultimately my biggest disconnect personally above everything else is that I was excited for a big space RPG, not necessarily the fact that it was Bethesda making it, if that makes sense. Because there's a lot of Bethesda isms in here that you can't escape, because that's just how Bethesda makes their games. It's how they account for so many choices, especially when it comes to the writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, they are what they are, and what
the
they
companions are better than most Bethesda companions, but they're still Bethesda companions. Like, they're not gonna have a level of interactivity of like a Mass Effect companion, but they are closer to that.
Speaking of Mass Effect, I think one of the things I liked most about this game is that it feels like whenever I describe this game to people who have played a Bethesda game before, what I always say to people is that it feels like Bethesda was trying to make a BioWare game, and I don't use that as an insult. I mean like a good classic BioWare game. It feels like they took a lot more inspiration from that in a way where it feels like
a Baldur's Gate.
There you go.
I mean, I'm a weird person, Wyatt, and one of my favorite. I actually think that this might still be my favorite Mass Effect game, having played all three twice now. Mass Effect 1, I really like, even with all of its jank and weird ideas. I think it nailed the feeling of space exploration, despite not being a game about exploration. And I think Starfield's in a very similar spot for me, of what I would have wanted Bethesda's take on a thing that had the same like design principles as Mass Effect 1 did. Where it's got the planetary stuff, it's got the space stuff. It just feels really fun to run around. And a lot of it is like same as Mass Effect 1, randomly generated content that is just not super worth your time, but it being there enhances the sense of scale that the game needs to really sell the atmosphere.
And one thing that you and I both said, one thing that you and I both stressed was that as long as the game doesn't force you to go to these empty planets, it's not going to be an issue. And outside of if you want to hunt for a resource instead of buying it at a vendor or something, you really don't have to.
Yeah.
And they're just they're there for a lot of flavor. And I don't know, I still like going down onto random planets sometimes and just seeing what's going on. It's
the important note there is that it is on you to just do it sometimes. Like, if you're hating doing the random planetary stuff, stop doing it. No one's making you.
Yeah. No one's making you. I will say, because on every planet you're gonna get like abandoned mining facility or abandoned research station, whatever.
Yeah.
Those do tend to repeat themselves, and it's like same layout, same enemies, that kind of thing. But every now and then I come across a location that I haven't been to before. And that's worth pointing out, is that even, 3 days in, it's like, oh, I haven't been to this kind of building before. This
Yeah,
is
so
kinda
I've
neat.
seen
What's
the
this?
same location 4 times, but it's the only one that I've ever seen repeated. Like, I've seen one specific thing like 4 or 5 times, but all the other ones haven't been repeating for me. So
I've seen like some oil, like it's like refinery station or whatever that I've seen repeated a few times, like science stations and mining facilities and stuff like that. But a lot of it, like occasionally, it's really exciting to see like a location that I haven't.
yeah. And the
that I
level
haven't seen
design
before.
for most of them is very good. Like, level design
This
across
is
the
the
game
best.
is
Yeah,
way
these are
above
the
better.
Bethesda's past
These,
stuff.
especially combat areas. These are the best like designed combat areas I've ever seen in a Bethesda game. Like Fallout, Fallout's interior spaces always just felt like there's some corridors and there's some rooms every now and then, and you fight in them. Here they feel like legitimately well designed combat spaces that have really good flow to them and that do a good job of trying to accommodate for a lot of different playstyles. It reminds me of how Cyberpunk designed a lot of its combat areas,
Yeah,
where it
absolutely.
also felt very well designed, tried to incorporate a lot of playstyles, and I think they do a very good job here. And on that note, it's probably the best Bethesda combat that we've gotten. Would you say that's safe to say?
I don't like the melee combat, but everything else, I feel like melee is kind of a
I
iffy
don't
playstyle
like
here.
melee weapon combat.
Yeah.
I love hand to hand. I love unarmed in this game.
Which is super good to hear. And yeah, I think the potential for playstyles here is huge. I'm sure we'll get really into that.
I mean,
when
I
we
just
have
sent you guys
the big discussion, because I think we all have
yeah.
been playing very different builds, which is very exciting.
I just sent you guys a video where someone did like an all stealth build. And when you're watching it, I don't know if anyone saw it, but when you're watching it, you're like, this looks like a completely different game at this point. And
Yeah,
it looks really smooth and well done.
Someone turned it into Dishonored with the amount of stealth that they were able to do, and with the uses of the gadgets and things. It was wild.
It was really, really neat. I think it's their most like versatile in terms of like accommodating different like forms of combat or just encounters, or like how you deal with encounters in general. The guns feel really good. That Coachman double barrel shotgun feels just so crunchy.
Yeah,
so
I've fallen in love with
boomy.
the Kodama SMG. Oh, it's got the right sound.
I keep trying to be like just a hand-to-hand character, but there are some times, and there is now 2 shotguns that I've fallen in love with. One of them, I think, is a variant on the Coachman called the I forget the name of the alien, but it's like the Asa Tamer.
Yeah, the one you can get in Aquila.
Oh, it's so, I love incendiary rounds. I love setting people on fire so much. It is so fun, and the just the recoil and the sound of that thing. The other one is one of the more like sort of like in between futuristic shaped weapon and boxy bits. I don't know. I forget what factory it's from.
I think it is.
Not the Big Bang. Not the laser one. No, this one.
Is it like the
I'll have
tech
to find
shotgun? The breach?
I don't entirely. It doesn't look very techy. It looks a lot more smooth and polygonal. And it has like some white, like sort of diamond-esque designs.
I don't know that I've gotten that one, Alex. You're describing a design that is not familiar.
And it
very
has a really long barrel, and then at the end of it, it's a shotgun with a silencer, so I can use it in stealth playthroughs, and it is so fun.
Nasty.
It is ridiculous. Oh.
All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to cap our Starfield discussion for now, because we're gonna get back into all of this in 2 weeks. That means we're to shoutouts. We've done our gamut of things. We've run long as we expected to this episode.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and kick us off for shoutouts because I got one next to me. Picked this bad boy up earlier today and very excited to read through the last round.
Nice.
It's very.
Let me know what you think about it. I read
here.
it not very long ago.
Ooh, pretty.
I'll go next. I think I've already shouted this game out, but it's so awesome that I'm going to shout it out again. Go play Bolt Gun, because Bolt Gun is fucking awesome, and the review scores, the general review scores that it's gotten on like OpenCritic is absolute heresy. It deserves so much more because it's
Which is on point. Why? Because that game will let you burn the heretics.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I don't know a thing about Warhammer. I know very little about Warhammer.
You don't need to. You get a big gun. You shoot the demons.
As much as I like boomer shooters, I get really into them for like a week, and then or for like a couple days or so, and then I just kind of like fall off of it. This one has like kept my interest throughout, and it's just awesome. Please go play Bolt Gun.
Pumpkin bisque.
Nice.
I guess that leaves me, unless you've got anything to add to Pumpkin Bisque.
Nope.
I think it was a simple and pointed one, Alex. It was very very just get the point across.
I don't have a whole ton going on, so shout out to these Finnish long drinks. They're pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
let's
great!
go.
We have another one.
Turning you onto them.
Yeah.
This is my last one. So
this is also my last one.
I have not been a big fan of the trend of hard seltzers. But this one's actually good, I feel like.
Because it doesn't have a vodka base, it has a gin base. That's the big difference.
We're not advertising for them.
Before you two nerds about alcohol start getting too far into your vodka versus gin discussions, though I am on your side, gin base is much better. We'll get back. We'll see y'all next week for Armored Core, and then the week after for Starfield. As always, Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. Pacific time on the podcast platform of your choice, YouTube and Twitch. If I can get the thing there properly outro, but you know. Sometimes we have tech difficulties, and sometimes it's fine.
Sometimes? Sometimes?
Good replacement.